programs are often 1 or 2 years, and they can either involve coursework or they can involve a combination of coursework and research. So for example, at Cornell, we have an MEng program, which is very course intensive. It's a 1-year course intensive master's program, either in computer science or in information science. And you can take that if you would like, or there's a 2-year mix of research and coursework related master's program. And that one is much more competitive to get into. There's not as many students. So the MEng program has hundreds of students, but the MS program has maybe like 10 or something. I don't know what the exact numbers are, but it's much smaller. And it's also, the MS program is funded. So your tuition would be covered and your fees would be covered, but also you'd even get a small stipend. So not every university has this, but a lot of universities do. So I know that Princeton University has this, and so on. And so if you're interested in applying to master's programs, you can look up universities that you might be interested in and see whether they have 1 or 2 year master's programs, whether they're funded or not, and like how competitive they are to get into. Sometime this week or maybe earlier next week, but hopefully this week we'll send you a list of different universities that we know have funded master's programs. So that's something that you can keep in mind. Oftentimes for both the master's and the PhD applications, you're required to have submitted general GRE and a TOEFL exam. And I'm guessing a lot of people on this call may have already taken their exams, but this is, I know, something that a lot of people have questions about. So does anyone have questions actually about the GRE or the TOEFL? Or if you have any questions, actually, also, you can interrupt me at any point. Okay, I'm guessing there are no questions because there was a silence. And then in addition to these, you're also asked to submit a letter of recommendation from people that you've worked with. For the letters of recommendation, it helps to ask someone that you've had ability to work with in some capacity. So this could be if you've worked on a research project, then you can ask someone that was your supervisor there. If you've taken a class that is in your interest area and maybe you did very well in that class, you can ask your instructor for that class. If you've worked in industry before, you can ask your bosses in industry and so on. So you're able to have a mix of letters of recommendation. The things to keep in mind here are that you want to ask people who will be able to write you the strongest letter, because the strength of the letter will matter a lot in your application process. But you also want to keep in mind about getting a letter from someone who's in your research or whatever your interests are. Like if it's whatever your interest might be, like you want to ask someone who can speak to that, right? So, when I was applying, I did math as an undergrad, and so it was very difficult for me to get letters of recommendation from computer scientists because I was applying to computer science programs. So this was something that I kind of deliberately worked on the year before applying, so I could have at least some letters of recommendation from people in theoretical computer science so that my application would have some weight to it. So this is something that you want to keep in mind. A lot of these also ask for CVs and resumes. And for those, there are a lot of resources online, but you'll be assigned a mentor. We're going to send out the assignment sometime this week, and you'd be able to send your CV and resume to your assigned sort of mentor, and they'd be able to help you edit it in case any edits are needed. But there's also a lot of resources online, so you can use those as a starting point as well. And you're also asked to submit transcripts. A lot of times they only ask for an unofficial transcript, so you can, take a scan, or if your university has online resources, you can use those and just use that to submit your transcript. And then maybe once you get admitted, they might ask for an official transcript to confirm that what you submitted was your real transcript. And then for master's or PhD programs, they might also ask for a personal statement or a statement of purpose. These carry less weight for the master's programs, but for the PhD programs, they carry a lot of weight. So in the statement of purpose, you can think of it as, what you're doing is you're applying for a job and you're trying to convince them that you're best fit for that job. So for a master's program, maybe you can say, these are my backgrounds, this is the classes that I've taken, and these are the things that I would like to do in this program, and this is why I think I'm a good fit. And for the PhD programs, you would want to convince them that you can be a good researcher. So either you can mention research that you've already done and say, I've had these experiences and this is how relevant they are to the research that I want to do. This is the kind of research I'm interested in, and these are people that I would like to work with at your university. I should say that there's also a lot of online resources on this, and we'll send those to you as well in case you want to use those as starting points. And your mentor will also be able to make any edits. It will help you make any edits on your personal statements. I just want to make sure that you guys can still hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Awesome. I just went through like 6 big things, so I'm sure you guys have questions. So someone ask a question.
I have a question regarding the personal statement.
Sure.
Is it very important to state which area you want to do research in? Like in the case where we have like 3 areas that you're interested in, do they place a lot of importance on you being very specific?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So for master's programs, for master's programs, I wouldn't worry too much about it, just because they know that you might still be more in the exploratory phases. But for PhDs, it's kind of unfortunate. I mean, I should say that this is sort of partially my opinion and partially something that I think is actually true. I do think that you should be specific, at least a little specific, right? So you should be able to at least say, so when I applied, I said, I'm interested in the intersection of mathematics and computer science, and specifically theoretical computer science. I am excited by computational complexity and algorithms. And then I mentioned like a couple of papers that I knew were from people who are instructors at that, like professors at that university. And I now do something very different, right? Like I'm not doing computational complexity, and it's only been like 3 years. And even then I knew that it might change, that I might shift. But when you're applying, usually what happens is that there's some combination of like just evaluating you overall based off of your strength of your application. And then there's some amount of like sending your like portfolio basically to a specific group and saying, do you guys want this person, right? So these specific groups would be like the computer vision group, NLP group, like rest of AI, theory, like systems, security, like all of these have like different clusters of professors. And because computer science PhDs tend to be very advisee intensive in that you like work with your advisor and they might even pay you at some point and so on, right? Ultimately, they want to know that they can make a good match between the students that are admitted and the professors that are there. And so if you're able to make specific statements and they're able to place you in a group that will be excited to have you, that's going to work in your favor. So you want to be specific, but the downside is also being too specific, because then maybe you've narrowed in on just one professor and that professor is not interested in taking students that year. So you don't want to do that either.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's a very weird, like, it's a very weird balance, and one that is very kind of, it varies from person to person. So, and also like, I think it comes down to like just sort of like the wording and how you're expressing it, right? There's a difference between saying like, I'm super excited about this, and this is like something that I'm very passionate about, and like, I can't imagine myself doing anything else, versus like, this is something I'm really excited about, and I'm excited by how it interacts with all these other fields, and I'm excited to learn about other things, but this is something that I want to explore now. So Killian just joined us. Killian, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you
awesome.
see me? Can you hear me?
Yes, good. So we did introductions. So Killian, maybe we won't do introductions with everyone, but I'll introduce you to everyone else. So everyone, this is Killian Weinberger. He is the chair of the admissions committee this year. Is that accurate?
That is accurate.
Okay. He's weirdly moving around because he's on his treadmill.
That's right.
So Cornell has really great people to offer. So I was going to go through, so we kind of started late, Killian, because we had some technical difficulties. I was gonna go through some stuff, but I think like I can send you the PDF of this for you guys and also like set up another call. So maybe the best thing that we could do is if we all just asked Killian questions about Cornell. Well, if you guys asked him, I don't have to ask him any questions about Cornell. Maybe that's something we can do. And I can get you started, Killian. So maybe if you could sort of tell people, so we have a mix of people who are applying to PhD programs and also master's programs. So at a high level, if you could tell us like what Cornell is looking for in applicants for both, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, sounds good. So I'm also actually faculty at Cornell. So it's not my full-time job to be on the admissions committee. So and I do, my research is machine learning. So I run a machine learning group here at Cornell. What we're looking for in general, I can talk to you a little about the process. So the way it works is we get the applications and then we distribute it amongst the distribute them amongst the faculty, and faculty basically look through the application profile. Essentially this consists of letters, grades, the whole transcripts and research statements, etc. And then basically, faculty kind of look for who they think may be a good addition to their group. Multiple things factor into this. So some people are more mathematical. So especially, I know, of course, more the machine learning AI landscape. Some people are more mathematical. They look more for stronger math skills. Some expect coding skills or coding experience, etc. Ultimately, one thing though is important that this is a university, right? So you can take classes and in pretty much anything. So it's also okay if they don't, people don't know something. Basically, we're happy to teach you, right? That's something the whole point of this exercise. So what's typically what I look for is someone who I think I'm trying to find someone who's like just excited and has this is someone where I think I can teach them to actually become very successful in their PhDs. That's kind of the overall goal. So even if you don't have research experience and so on, actually I personally don't look at that all that much. Some people think that's more important, but often a function of whether you have research experience is a function of what school you went to. That's highly correlated with what the activities are at that school. So a good proxy in some sense is if you bring someone to Cornell, and Cornell is basically this amazing kind of institute, right? A world-class research institute. What would that person make out of that opportunity? And a good proxy for this is what did the person make out of the opportunity, whoever place they went to, right? So if you basically went to a small liberal arts college or something where maybe there wasn't anyone in machine learning, right? Yet you kind of see, well, the person still kept up with it and was very interested, did a lot of stuff. That may be more valuable than someone who went to, for example, Carnegie Mellon, right? And actually is on 2 papers, but hey, maybe it's like 5th author and just helped in some lab or something. That's actually, less impressive in that sense because we kind of factor in that, of course, the person had way more opportunities, in a place where there's many, many research activities in that area going on. Those are kind of the main points. I don't know if there's any questions. Feel free to ask me. Or really, is anything I should go into?
Are there any questions? I can keep asking Killian questions for you guys, but I think it's better if you guys ask him so that he's answering questions that are relevant to you. Okay, I can ask. So one of the questions that came up earlier was about the statement of purpose for PhD applications. I mentioned what I think to be true, but I'm also not 100% confident that that's how they're read at Cornell. So how important would you say it is that someone is able to say something very specific? Like I would like to work with like these 3 faculty in machine learning, or even just this one person, versus like I'm interested in the intersection of, say, like systems and security, which is broader, you know, like how specific do you like to see statements of purposes?
Actually, what I would do is a danger with a statement of purpose is that people limit themselves. So they say, I really, really want to work on X. And that can be a limitation, because then someone actually, who does Y, let's say, you say, I really want to do Bayesian inference or something, right? Which is a very specific subset of machine learning most people probably haven't heard of. But let's say I really like that person. I think that's a good person, but I actually don't do Bayesian inference. And I say, oh, sorry, the person's probably not excited about my research, and make a pass. So I think that's a little bit of a danger in that sense, that people are too specific. What I would recommend usually is, unless you really say, oh, that's the only thing I want to work on, where you can, like, most statement of purposes, frankly, are not very good. That's because students don't really know what to write, right? They're undergrads and they don't really know how to do research yet. So they write something like, my whole life I wanted to do a PhD, and now I'm really excited about this opportunity, and so on. And you just read a lot of those. So the way you can distinguish yourself a little bit is by talking a little bit technical. So if you actually say, here's something I read about this algorithm and I was really excited about it, or I read this book, and this particular work, this is a paper I read, and it was really inspirational. Here's a very specific application, and that just shows that basically you took some initiative, that you understand what machine learning even is. Like, for example, I mean, I'm talking more about the machine learning side because that's my area. But so one thing we get a lot is people say, I want to build AI, right? And that's interesting, but ultimately that's just something you may have gotten from television or something, right? Because it's currently a lot of talk about it, and doesn't really distinguish you from the average person, you would meet downtown or something. So if you can say something about actually how AI works, right, or some, basically that you understand what it is, that could be interesting. What I typically then would recommend is, if you have someone particular you want to work with, say that, but maybe also say that you're open to other people, right? Because the university is big, right? There's, for example, Cornell, there's probably 20 faculty who do AI. Probably most of them do really interesting stuff that, stuff that you'd be interested in. So, if you restrict yourself to just a small subset, right, then the danger is that you restrict yourself to the same subset that everybody, restricts themselves to. So there may be some faculty who be just joined, right? For example, we're hiring someone who's coming next fall. She's probably not yet on the homepage, so people don't know that she's coming. So she'll be looking through the application pile, right? And so she may be a great, she's a superstar. That's why we hired her. She was really, really excited about her joining, right? So if she finds someone, I wouldn't give her the impression that you only want to work with someone else in the faculty. So key points basically are, talk a little about that you already know what AI is, a little, even if you don't, you're not an expert yet, obviously, because you haven't started your PhD yet, but you know a little bit what you're getting yourself into. You know a little how these algorithms work, what the applications are. I think that's more valuable than just generic things of saying, my whole life I've been excited about this, etc. These are kind of that's a pitfall that I see, and the other pitfall that I often see is, people just overemphasizing that they want to work with one particular person.
Yeah.
Being open-minded, then I think that's good, because ultimately we want to teach you. The other thing is I see people say, like, I want to work with Professor Weinberger, and they quote something from my webpage, but it's something that I did 7 years ago, right? It's like, well, I'm actually not working on that anymore, right? So that's kind of a danger. It's like, well, I'm not sure if I want to accept that person, because they may be grossly disappointed if they see that I actually shifted my research over the years.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So one data point that you guys can use is my applications. So for my applications, so I'm not suggesting that you all do this, because I think I also did, mine was slightly overkill. But one thing that I did was, for every school that I applied to, within the first paragraph of my statement of purpose, I said, you know, like I said, the usual stuff, like I'm applying for a PhD, I'm interested in these areas. And then I said, you know, at Cornell University, I would be interested in exploring research with, and then I mentioned like 3 to 4 faculty for every university. And then I did like my standard sort of like, this is my background, this is stuff that I've done so far, these are my interests. And then in the second page, I mentioned, you know, at least like 1 paper per faculty. Like I didn't necessarily read all these papers carefully, but I was like, okay, here's one work that this faculty member has done and it seems interesting to me. And in some cases, I even said like, I'd be interested in exploring these directions. But what I did was I tried to make sure that the selection of professors that I picked was not like super narrow, or the selection of papers that I picked was not super narrow, so that I could express my diversity of interest through that. But I also showed that that I had actually done my homework and that I had actually looked at faculty at that university, and I had a specific reason for applying to that university, rather than, you know, just saying I'm applying because I'm applying to PhD programs and you guys were in the top X, you know. So that's something that I did. I mean, my applications were mostly successful, so it leads me to believe that at least it wasn't a terrible strategy that killed my my application process. So I think that could be useful, but I don't know, Killian, do you think that like if someone just didn't mention any faculty members there, just talked about what they've done?
I think that's fine.
Is that
also, somewhere else in your application, you actually say, like there's a field saying, who could you imagine working with, right? So if you put it in there, that's perfectly fine, right? That's actually what people look for. So when we assign them the applications to faculty, you basically look into like, oh, here's this whole pile of people who said they're interested in working with you, right? And then they basically look through those applications. Sometimes it's a proxy. Sometimes it's not that faculty, or it's someone else who's in the same field who looks through them.
Yeah.
One thing is also important. We, you know, I said like most of these statements are not very good. And what I mean by this is we know that you don't know how to write these things yet. So, you know, don't agonize too much over this. Essentially, you know, we read these statements and we try to kind of make sense of it. And essentially, you know, look for, you know, does that person, like what we're kind of looking for is does the person kind of have some clue of what a PhD even is about, you know, what he or she is getting him or herself into. But, you know, if you write not such a great statement, well, most people don't. So, and we know how to look past that. I mean, that's not such a big thing.
Awesome. Are there any questions? Is everyone there? Just confirming.
Hi.
Can someone actually say something just to make sure that it's not just
Hi.
Good. Okay,
Hi.
so people are here. Okay. Oh, yeah, good. Oh, did you have a question?
I have a question.
Awesome.
So the part going through the graduate school website, with respect to the GRE, I saw it's recommended but not required. So I want to ask about what that actually means. Does it affect me if I don't put it, or I just want to get clarified on that statement.
Yeah, so in the past, we did require the GRE score. We found that ultimately it's not particularly predictive of whether a student will be successful in the program. So we changed it this year to make it optional. And I think we really mean it's optional. Yeah, I mean, it's just not particularly insightful. That's what we found. That basically it's, if you study hard, it's good to get easy to get a good score, but ultimately, some people, you know, we couldn't really see that people who had a particularly high score were better than people who didn't get a high score, and almost everybody kind of was in the same range. So, you know, don't sweat too much about it. I think we will, you know, if you don't have it, I don't think it will be held against you at all. On the other hand, the TOEFL score, if you are not a native English speaker, that is required. And that's something that's from the university actually dictated. So we cannot waive that one. It's a good question, though. Any other questions from anybody?
How many applicants do professors usually accept each year?
How many applicants does one particular professor get?
Yes.
It varies greatly, actually. It varies like extremely. Like some get 5 and some get 500. So it really depends. It depends on the area. It depends on, you know, who that person is, etc. It's hard to predict. I guess I can tell you a little. So of course, machine learning AI are currently harder right now. So those tend to be the areas where you have more applications. Also, you know, if a professor is more well known, more students put their name down, right? And so, I mean, that's maybe how you can kind of score a little if you basically look into faculty, kind of the young faculty who just started, right? And see what they did and kind of see if that interests you, right? They may get fewer applications, a few applications that explicitly name them, and so they may kind of pick you, you know, that may improve your chances a little. But one thing I also want to say, we do have committees, we have subcommittees, right? So it's actually not that that particular faculty has to look through the pile. Like if you mention someone, let's say in scientific computing, etc., there will usually probably just be 1 or 2 people from that area who look through all the applications and then maybe check with someone, do you think that's a, you know, he or she mentions your name, do you want to accept them? But it could very well be that a person never looks at any applications because he or she is just on some other committee and doesn't have time for it and just trusts his or her colleagues to pick the right people. Good question. Any other questions?
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. So with respect to international students, is there a limit? Is it that they don't take a lot of international students in, or it doesn't matter also?
Did you say because of the? So in general, I think a majority of our students are international. Okay. The political climate has not changed anything about that. I think Cornell is pretty independent. So in case you're worried about the current administration, I mean, there's visa issues, but that's unrelated to Cornell. So we do not take that into account. So that's, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Kylian. Thanks for the time. I have a question.
Yeah.
Hello? Okay. Going back to the GRE question on the GRE, on the GRE, will having the GRE score complement the relative an average CGPA?
So sorry, you have to say that again. I'm not sure I understood. Yeah.
Will having GRE score complement an average GPA?
Will a very high GRE score complement an average GPA?
Yep.
It's hard to say. I mean, it's not as formulaic as you may think. So people can look at the overall picture of the whole applicant, right? So if you have a lower GPA, people would also look into what classes did you not do that well in, right? And if these are kind of, you know, if these are classes that are kind of outside of the area that you're applying for, then it may not be that relevant. I can tell you when I applied for grad school, back then GRE was more important, and I got a terrible GRE score in my English. Actually, my English was worse than random. So it was multiple choice question with 4 answers. And I got fewer than a quarter of the points, which means I would have done better just clicking random, and there was an explanation for this, but I really had to go, and I tried to rush it, and I was really bad. But so I guess the grad school that I got into, they kind of discounted that, and did not consider that. So ultimately, the answer is we look at the whole package. The GRE score probably does less. It's probably more the classes that you didn't do well in. I think that's more interesting. Any other questions?
What's the retention rate of the PhD student?
I think it's actually very high. So very, very few students at Cornell drop out, which is very unique to Cornell. Like most other schools have high dropout rates. One reason why Cornell may not have may have such a low, I don't know exactly the rate, but it's ridiculously low. My theory is that we have a very long process of where you can find an advisor. So you have a long time to find an advisor. Whereas other schools, I think you just have maybe a couple of weeks. And then if you have a bad match, that could be a bad thing. So, but I'm not entirely sure why it's so low. The dropout rate is so low. The retention rate is very, very high. So almost everybody who comes here to do a PhD leaves with a PhD. Occasionally people, if they kind of realize, get really disillusioned, or who knows, like there's like some things that happen, right? Or they have to go back to their home country because something happened in their family. There is some stories, and people usually leave with a master's. Yeah, but it's pretty rare. I've seen it once, I think. Any other questions?
Hello?
Yeah.
Hi, Killian. Thank you for your time. My name is Cynthia, and I'm an undergrad student here in Long Beach. And I'm planning on applying for a PhD, and I was wondering how much value you put in independent research versus like professional experience in a research lab, for example. So does it matter to have like a published paper, those kind of things? Thank you.
So it depends. A lot of applicants nowadays have publications, but it may not be as important as people think it is. So certainly some countries, it's relatively easy to get on a paper, but these are often papers in some third-tier conferences and so on. So it doesn't matter all that much. It's probably, if you have some experience, I think what's the more interesting part is it's not really if you ended up on a paper or something. I think that's, as an undergrad, what control do you have over this, right? Very little, right? It depends what lab you're in, what they're working on. You probably didn't lead the research, right? So that's more luck than anything. What's more interesting, so if you're in a research lab, then you probably get letters of recommendations from people who then tell you, tell us how you did in that research lab, etc. That's kind of where that helps. Another thing is that you can then actually have a pretty good idea of what you're getting yourself into, right? So there is this, most people don't know what research is like, right? And certainly if I ask my parents, like what they think my job is and what my job really is, completely, there's very little intersection, right? So, and the fact that if you have some experience that, you may have a more realistic view of what research is like, what getting a PhD is like, etc. So that is kind of an advantage in that sense. But even if you don't have that, I think certainly when I applied for grad school, I had no research experience. To be honest, I didn't even know what machine learning was. I just thought, it was cool. So, and you can still, it's still fine. So, as I said, we're looking at the package, right? So you have, if you have good grades or something, or if you actually have a very clear idea of what a PhD is, you have some experience, all of this is in your favor. But if you, overall, you kind of look at the sum of the whole package. Did that answer your question?
Whoever just joined, would you mind muting your mic when you're not speaking?
Sorry, thank you. Yes, that answered my question.
Okay, awesome. Any other questions by anybody?
So I can ask a question, Killian. In terms of letters of recommendation, are there, like, do you have suggestions? Because I remember when I was applying, and also a lot of my friends when they were applying, like we were able to get maybe one letter from someone that we've done research with, and then for other people to ask for letters of recommendation, like I wasn't very clear. And I still don't know actually what combination of people you should be asking. So do you have suggestions on how to go about selecting who to ask for a letter of recommendation, and what to ask them to, like, you know, if you have to provide them information for what to include in there, like what would you recommend?
Yeah, so the best thing probably is someone who can write something positive about you. And a positive, I mean that seems obvious, but actually you'd be surprised how many people don't factor that in. So a lot of people basically look for the most famous person or something they've ever interacted with. That's probably someone who doesn't know you at all. And so they just feel, you know, okay, sure, I write you a letter, but then it's a very generic letter. And
hi guys, I don't hear anything.
Sorry?
No sound.
Oh, Lino, you can hear us? Lino has some audio problems. I guess, Radiant, you can hear me, right? Okay. So, but so the best thing is, if you think of a good letter of recommendation, what would it say? Like a good letter of recommendation has some anecdotes that actually describe you and why you are a particularly good fit for the PhD program. So if you basically say like, here, he or she worked on some problem, or, you know, she was in my class, right? And you know, she stood out because of X, she could answer some questions, etc., that other students had a hard time with, or something about you that's very specific, right? That actually makes a very strong letter. So think about if there's someone that you maybe have impressed in the past, or where you think, like, you know, they know you, they can write something about you, you've worked with them, etc. Those are kind of the good letters. Now, not everybody, now it's hard to find 3 letters that are like this. If you find one such letter, that's already pretty good. And then if the other letters basically just say he or she is a strong student, you know, and they're more generic, that's okay, right? Because it's, as I said, it's very, very hard to find, you know, to even know 3 people who can write something very specific about you. The other thing is people in academia tend to be better letter writers than people in industry, just because they can make better comparisons. So in academia, you can say, out of all the students I have, you know, she stood out or something like this. Whereas in industry, often the comparisons are less meaningful. Like in my group, that person is, you know, someone I really trust. Well, we don't know what your group is, right? And we don't know what the company is or something. So it's very hard to calibrate these letters. Whereas for we, you know, just being all academics ourselves, we know how to read academic letters.
Awesome. And also one more question, because I know that many people are wondering about this. What are your thoughts on prospective applicants contacting faculty before they apply to say, are you taking student, or just let you know I'm applying, and do you have any suggestions? Or, you know, one of these more sort of generic, not generic, but like one of these emails that that you might receive before applications.
I think it doesn't hurt. It may help if you say something. I would keep the email short. Faculty always get a lot of email. So long emails, like if you write a faculty a long email, they can't read it, right? You don't have time. So because you can, when you go through your email, right, in the morning while you're drinking coffee or something. So if you write something very short and concise, then the probability of the person reading it is much higher. And so if you basically just make a few points, you know, saying I want to apply, you know, the faculty probably tells you, yes, do apply, right? Would love to see your application. And then maybe they recognize you again when they go through them. But more important is to mention the person's name in your application.
Awesome. Are there any, Killian, I'm guessing you have to leave at 11, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Are there any final questions for Killian? I can stick around after and answer questions too. And whoever just joined, would you mind muting your camera? I mean, your phone, your mic. Okay. Yeah, this was great, Killian. Thank you so much for your time.
And actually, let me just reiterate one important that's very important. Like what we really do is we try to find someone. Like what we are looking for is someone where we have the feeling when he or she comes to Cornell, they will use this resource that is Cornell University, where you have a lot of grad students, a lot of knowledge, a lot of classes around you. You use that resource to do something great, right? That's really what we're looking for. So it's less interesting if kind of, you know, what you've achieved in the past. It's more like, you know, or what your resume like looks like in terms of the obvious points, like what school you went to and so on, the grades you had. So it's more like, you know, given the opportunity you had, right? Given the school you went to, given whatever, like, you know, this particular person, what have you made out of your opportunities, right? That's what we're looking for, because then we want someone who comes here and basically then kind of gets going, right, and achieves great things. So that's explicitly the objective of the hiring committee to look for. So, you know, that may be something you may want to emphasize in your research statement. We basically say, here's some challenge I had, and look what I made out of it, right? Like I, you know, had this situation, and et cetera. And this is kind of, you know, I don't know whatever college you guys going to, but you know, basically here's how I kind of, you know, try to get some experience in topics X, or here's something where I took initiative and I maybe started reading a book by myself on this topic, etc. Like these are kind of things that people are looking for. All right, good. Thanks so much, Radiate, for running this. This was really awesome.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Killian.
Looking forward to seeing your applications.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye. I'll stick around for a bit in case you guys have any additional questions. We actually ended up covering a lot of the stuff that I wanted to say. Was there anything that you wanted to discuss, like separately, or is there anything that we haven't mentioned that you would like to talk about? Okay, if not, I can, let me try to go through. Yep.
Hi.
Hi there.
I think, so my question would go in terms of, since I'm not certain how much research experience plays in graduate applications, because like for me, I think I've had experience working in software development mostly, and as such, I've developed interest in machine learning. So so does this play a role?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. It's related to what Killian was mentioning earlier. So if you're applying for master's programs, then it shouldn't be an issue. If you're applying for PhD programs, then because PhDs are predominantly conducting research, they will want to know that you've had experience doing research. But one thing that Cornell does, and some other universities also do that I think is good, is that they recognize that ability to do research as an undergraduate is a luxury. Like it's not a luxury that everyone has, depending on what university you went to, what country you're currently living in, and so someone just, hello? Can you guys still hear me?
Yes, right.
Yeah, okay, good. Sorry, It just said that I was muted randomly. So I was saying that some people just don't get the opportunity to do research before they apply for PhD programs through no fault of their own. And Cornell recognizes that, and they don't count that against you. Now, what you have to do is, because you're not able to say, I've done research in XYZ, and therefore I know what research is like, you instead have to use proxies to communicate that you kind of might be still good. You might still be a very good researcher. So you can consider mentioning maybe some hard problems that you solved as a software engineer and how you like the process of solving these hard problems. If you're saying that you're specifically interested in machine learning or whatever it is, then you can say, that these are papers that I've read or books that I've gone through. I specifically like the section. So you can emphasize that you like the process of doing research through other activities that you've already done.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I'd like to apologize in advance if this question has been asked before. But given that some of us will be going to Black in AI and NIPS and stuff like that, and we might be, want to say, exposed to a good showing of these AI celebrities and stuff, how do you go about looking for potential supervisors? How do you approach them? How do you like initiate that process? Because I've noticed that most funding applications, most PhD applications, actually kind of prefer you to already know someone in that institution that you're kind of reaching out to, like as you apply.
Yeah, so that's a very, very good question. I'm glad that you're asking that. So Black in AI last year was really a very helpful opportunity for people to try to find advisors and or even professors just who are at universities that they were applying to. And it really did make a difference for many people. So it's certainly something that you can use to your advantage. So sorry, I'm getting distracted because someone's asking me your email. Sorry, I was getting distracted because one of the people who was on this call dropped out and is chatting me. So, okay, so what you can do is if are you presenting a poster or no?
Poster and oral.
Oh, you're giving an oral. Which papers are you?
I'm the first one, but we'll talk about that later.
Okay.
The reinforcement learning one.
Yeah, so that's awesome. So if you're actually presenting, that's even great. That's even better, right? Because you already have an opportunity to like give your sales pitch essentially. So if you're presenting, then definitely prepare your poster well. Practice like a 1-minute version of it, a 3-minute version of it, a 5-minute version of it, right? And there's going to be a very healthy stream of people during the poster session that are coming in and will want to talk to you. So just show up, like drink some coffee, get some good food so you have a lot of energy. I don't know what you need to do to like feel energetic. Show up and like don't be shy. Don't hesitate to just stop people and say, hey, can I tell you about my work? Like the poster session is a free-for-all. That is the one time you're allowed to like stop someone and say, you got to listen to what I did because it is awesome. Like just use that as an opportunity. So that's one great place. And a lot of the people recruiting graduate students will be at the poster session. They will be looking for students there. They'll be seeing what you've already done and whether they think that you might be a good fit or not. So that's one opportunity. A second one is the breaks. So there's like coffee breaks and lunch breaks and so on. During that time, you might consider just like keep your badge on so that you can see, so people can see your name and where you are. If you want, you can even say like looking for PhD opportunities or looking for master's opportunities, just to like, make it as easy as possible to like break the ice, right? And go and sit with people. Just like you're at a workshop, you're at a conference, people are there to network. And this goes for everyone, including the very senior people that don't need to talk to anyone and the more junior people for whom it's the first time attending a conference. So don't be shy. Go up and talk to someone, say hi. If you recognize their name, say that. Just say, hey, I know about your work in this area. So that's something that you can use. Same thing with the dinners. There will be a Black in AI dinner. Just go sit with people that you actually want to talk to and have something interesting to say to them. Now, for one of the even more aggressive things that you could do, you could look into programs that you want to apply to, and you could see which people you think might be at NIPS, and you can even consider emailing them and saying, hey, I will be at the Black in AI workshop where I'll be at NIPS, and I thought that you might be as well. If I could grab you for 15 minutes at some point and talk to you about this program, that would be great. Like that's something that you can absolutely say. It's a very forward ask, and people are very busy at conferences, and so they might say no, or they might not respond, right? Because people are busy and people might not respond. But if you're able to talk to even like, let's say 2 or 3 people, that's 2 or 3 programs where there will be a person there who knows you as a human being and knows your interest and will be able to make sure that your application gets read. So yeah, do your homework, but be forward is what I say.
Okay. Awesome.
Any other questions?
I have a last question.
Sure.
So, like this may have possibly been covered already, but what kind of things go into a statement of purpose? Like when you're applying?
Yeah, so that was covered already. So I'll cover it very briefly just to make sure that other people can ask a question as well.
Okay.
So just make sure that, so Killian mentioned two things that are a regular pitfall. So one is just the generic, like, I've always wanted to study machine learning since I was a child, blah, 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 and I wanted to do a PhD. Don't say that, like, no one cares. Just don't be like, when I was 5, no one cares what you did when you were 5. Well, your mom might care, but like, the people reading your applications don't care, right? And then the other downside is, so that doesn't work because you're not saying anything specific about machine learning. You're not saying why right now you're very well equipped to be a graduate student in this area. So that's what you want to do. And then the second thing is to just say, like, I want to work on this very specific thing that only one faculty member does there, or maybe that person doesn't even work on it anymore. Because what happens there is that you seem like you're very keen on doing one thing and nothing else. And that they might just think you look great, but we don't do this stuff. So tough luck, I guess. Maybe you'll get into some other university where there's more people doing this stuff. So you don't want to do that either. So the way that I think about statements of purposes is just basically think about it as a job application. You're saying, I would like to be a PhD student. What does a PhD student do? They do research. So you're saying, I would like to be a researcher. So mention either research experiences you've had or experiences that can lead them to believe that you understand what this process is. And say what you're interested in, say who you might be interested in exploring research with, mention a bunch of people, like maybe 3 or 4 people, so that you're not fixated on one person. So you're basically, if you think about it as like a job application, then that helps, right? Like in the same way that if you're applying for a software engineering position and they asked you to write a letter, you would just say, these are my experiences in this area, and this is why I think I'd be great there. Just think of it that way.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions? No questions?
Yeah, I'm good.
No, okay, you're good, but is everyone else good?
Yeah, maybe one question from me. Like, I joined in pretty late, so I don't know if I can be able to somewhere log on somewhere and feel, you know. Sorry?
Just ask.
Oh, as in, is there somewhere where this video was recorded so I can watch it later on to catch up with some of the things that I missed?
Sure, but we didn't. Yeah, I'm happy. Can you mute yourself when you're not speaking? Awesome. Yeah, so yeah, we can share the video so you can catch up. We'll also share a PDF with some information sometime this week.
Okay, that's right. Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? So actually, one more thing that I could do is, we've been streaming this on YouTube Live. The video is private, but it says that there's like 9 people who are watching it.
So actually,
so one thing that I could do is, if you are on the live channel right now and you have questions, if you chat it on in the comment section, I'll be able to see it and respond. So if you're watching the YouTube Live, feel free to comment your questions. Okay, good. So it seems like people on this call don't have any questions, and we've covered a lot of the material that I wanted to cover anyway. And so we'll send the PDF that I mentioned to you. And maybe if those of you who no longer have questions, if you guys could log out of this call, then people who are on the YouTube Live will be able to join. So maybe that's something that we could do, because there's a cap of, I think, 10 people on this call.
Okay, cheers, and thanks a lot for answering the questions.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, and see you.
Yeah, thank you. So those of you who are on the live, there's now a couple of slots, so you're able to join. You're able to join the call if you'd like to.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you, Radia.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Hello.
Hi there. Give me 1 second. Let me just make sure that some people. Oh wow. Okay. Good. Awesome. Good. So everyone new who just joined, could you guys mute your mic so that we don't hear feedback from the background? Great. So I have to leave. So we've been doing this call since about 10. So I have to leave in about 12 minutes. What I can do is I trust that you guys have been following the call over the past hour. So if you have any questions for me now, you can unmute yourself and ask your questions, and I'll be able to answer them. And the rest of it we can also do over email. So does anyone have any questions?
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, thank you very much for this meeting. I don't know if you're getting me well. I wanted to know about PhD in industry. Are there some in the States? And if there are, how do we go about applying them?
You're asking about doing a PhD within industry?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's not that I know of. They're certainly not common. They might exist, but I just don't know about them. I would say that I don't know if they're a good idea, because you could just be in industry and you could get paid a lot more and have fewer expectations on you in terms of research output, or you could just do a PhD and not have to split your time. So I don't know if it's a good idea to do a joint PhD, but one thing that you could do is within PhDs, it's certainly common to do internships over summers. This is something that I did for 2 summers, and it was an experience that I think helped with my research development. And a lot of people also do this. So you could consider doing internships. They're very common, both as a PhD student, but also before you start your PhD. But I don't know if doing a joint PhD program is a good call.
Okay. And about the PhD, is it possible to do a PhD in an area and then you want to apply for to do a master in a different area and then you want to apply for a PhD in another area?
Within the same university?
No, not the same.
At different universities, yeah. I mean, at Cornell, you could apply for the master's program, and then at like UT Austin, you can apply for a PhD. No one would know.
Okay, and the GRE, it's a must in the US.
It's a must in many schools in the US. Cornell does not require it, and if you don't submit it, it doesn't count against you. But the TOEFL is a must in all schools.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but there's Cornell doesn't require the GRE. There's a few other universities that don't require it, but the vast majority do. So this is something that you can look up on their website and see whether it's required or recommended or not, or not requested at all.
Okay, because I'm interested in applying for a PhD, but I haven't written a GRE before, and all the opportunities I see, they require GRE.
Yeah, so the US does for the most part require the GRE, but there are some schools that don't. You might also consider European schools, which don't necessarily require the GRE either.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions?
Hi guys.
Hi.
I'm called an analyst. So I had a question about writing emails to potential professors or supervisors for my PhD. I intend to apply for a PhD. Currently, I'm a graduate student.
Okay.
So I was asking, what's the best approach? Because on most occasions, you'll find that some professors, you might have, your research background might be a bit different from theirs, but you're interested into going into the area of research. So how do you convince them that you are ready to go into that area and you can do it?
That's a good question. So Killian mentioned this briefly earlier. You should definitely keep in mind that professors are very busy people, like really, really busy people, and they get a lot of emails. And so the main thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that you're communicating. First of all, you want to make sure that your email is not very long. So you want to send them as short of an email as you can. You also want them to know that this is not a form letter. This is not something you're copy pasting and just sending to everyone. So saying specific things to them is helpful to them because they know that you're asking them and not just trying to reach out to a bunch of faculty members. And then I think, you could try to set up a call with them or maybe just email them beforehand, or you could just say, are you accepting students? That's also fine. So just to use an example, let's say that you were doing like just straight up like machine learning, and then you wanted to work in natural language processing for your PhD, just as an example, right? And you wanted to work with an NLP professor, but you don't have any natural language processing experience, and you want them to know that you're still very keen on exploring this area. You could email them and say, hey, I'm interested in applying to your PhD program. I looked at the work of different faculty. I'm very excited about your research, and especially, this paper or something. I wanted to see whether, and then you can say, my research background is, or my background is in X, but I'm interested in learning more about Y and working in this area. Do you consider students that don't have an extensive background in this area? So you can say something like that. That's a yes or no question, right? And more often than not, they'll say yes. They'll just say, sure, because a lot of times your first year, you're going to be doing a lot of coursework anyway. And through that, you can learn more about a specific area, and people move around. So it's completely fine. So you can do that. And this is also something that you can do the convincing in your statement of purpose, right? You can say, these are my background. This is my background. This is what I've worked on so far. I'm interested in moving into this area, and say why. Presumably, if you're moving into it, you have a reason why you're doing that. So say why, and then say like what you've done now that is starting to prepare you for working in that area, whether it's coursework or starting to read papers or anything like that. That's something that you can do. Any other questions? Did that answer your question? Hello?
Finally.
So I can't really hear you, but I also have to leave in like 5 minutes. So maybe.
Is it a must if I'm intending to study for you?
I'm sorry?
So I was asking.
Would you mind chatting me your question, actually? That might make it easier. And in the meantime, I can take questions from other people. Are there any other questions? No questions?
Yeah, hello, good afternoon.
Hi there.
Yeah, this is Paul calling from Nigeria. I wanted to ask, so I'm willing to apply for masters in AI or robotics in an American university for masters. Okay, and so I've gone through a few schools. I've gone through Georgia Tech, Michigan, the MIT, John Hopkins, and I found different criterions for each school. Now, first off, their grade, the GPAs are different. Some like Michigan is asking for 4.5 and above, or 3.5 with a grade level of 4.0, and different schools now. So my question is this now: I really wanted to apply to Michigan. I graduated with a 4.2, and I wanted to apply to Michigan to see, but I don't know if I'll be allowed, if I'll be given admission because of first my GPA, and also are there ways where one can work as teachers, a TA, while having the master's program on?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So Killian covered this a little bit earlier. So for GPAs, some schools have a very strict requirement. They say unless it's above this, we're not going to accept your application, and they mention that in the website. And for those places, if you don't clear that threshold, then you should take what they're saying at face value and assume that they're not actually going to read your application. So you can focus on other schools. But if they don't mention a specific threshold, then you can trust that they're going to look at your application holistically and not just on your GPA or just your GRE or just anything. So you can consider, maybe writing a letter, like saying, you can say, like these are, like, first of all, they'll look at what classes you did well in and what classes you didn't do well in, and they're interested in seeing whether you did well in classes that are relevant to research that you want to do now. So that's something that you want to do. And so if there are specific reasons why your GPA is lower than you would like, then you can explain that in a letter. You can say, maybe during this period I was dealing with, maybe something with your family or something. I don't know. You can explain that. You don't have to, but that's something that if there were circumstances that led to that, then you have the ability to explain that. So that's something that you can do. And in terms of TA-ships, some schools have that, but usually you first have to be admitted and then you can figure out the details of whether you can be a TA. There are some universities that have funded master's programs. So Cornell has an MS program in computer science that you could do. It's very competitive and it doesn't take that many students, but it's fully funded and actually even gives you a stipend. I know Princeton also has a similar program. We don't have an exhaustive list of these schools, but you can look this up yourself, right? Like you can look at like the US ranking, like the US News ranking for the top, let's say 30 universities or something, I don't know. And you can look each of them up and you can see whether their master's programs are funded or not. So this is research that you can do for yourself. And the two data points that I mentioned with Cornell and Princeton suggest that there might even be more that have funded master's programs. So I'll take one more question and then I have to go because I've been here for a bit.
Hello?
Yeah?
I just typed the question. I don't know if you saw it.
Oh, awesome. So it says, is it mandatory to have published research papers to get into top programs like Cornell? No. Could you mute yourself when you're not speaking? Awesome. So it's not. What Killian mentioned, so different schools do the evaluation differently, but I trust that a lot of universities also have a sensible policy. So one thing that Cornell does is instead of comparing everyone against one another, what they compare you to is, what they compare you to is, did the best version of yourself, like how are you doing compared to the best version of yourself, right? So, in some universities, it's easier to get papers published because of, what country you might be from, what university you went to, what kinds of labs that you had access to. And then in other places, it's not at all because you can't get the kind of mentoring that you might need to get a research project done. You don't have these resources and so on. So in those cases, they understand that this was completely out of your control and you're not going to be penalized for that. And so they don't require that you have published research papers unless you are in a situation where you could have gotten a lot of research papers, but you just didn't, right? Or you could have gotten a research paper and you didn't. So what they're going to see is what opportunities you had and whether you use those opportunities to the fullest extent possible. And so if you were not given opportunities to do research in the past, that is not going to count against you. Good. Okay, so I have to go. But just to give you a heads up about what's happening, so we're going to send you a PDF that has a lot of the information that we covered today. We're going to try to share the recording of this call with people so people have access to it. And you're going to be assigned a specific mentor who's going to help you through the application process. So I ask that unless you have like generic questions about the assignment process or something, I ask that you don't email me because there's like 200 people applying for these for various programs, and I can't respond to 200 emails. But you will have someone who's assigned to you that can answer your questions, and everyone will only be assigned like 1 or 2 people or something. So you'll be able to get much more detailed and better feedback from your individual mentor. But if you have, if there are any bigger issues or you have sort of like more general questions, please feel free to reach out to me. And good luck with the application process. And if you're going to be at the workshop, then I hope you have a great time there too. Bye.